Hello everyone! Welcome to Untold History, the channel where we explore the most significant and often lesser-known events that have marked our world. Today we are going to delve into a heartbreaking event that has defined the lives of a persecuted minority, the Rohingya genocide in Myanmar. This episode of violence and mass displacement has been one of the worst humanitarian disasters in recent decades, and has highlighted ethnic and religious tensions in Southeast Asia, as well as the struggle for human rights in a region of great geopolitical importance. The Rohingya crisis is a story of persecution, violence, and despair. The Rohingya, a Muslim ethnic minority, live mostly in Rakhine State, a coastal region in western Myanmar, formerly known as Burma. Despite the fact that many Rohingya have lived in Myanmar for generations, the Myanmar government has long considered them illegal immigrants from Bangladesh and has denied them citizenship and other fundamental rights. This situation has generated a climate of institutional discrimination and constant violence against this minority. Myanmar's government, under a largely Buddhist system of government and with a past marked by military juntas, has been accused of implementing policies that systematically marginalize the Rohingya. This situation reached its climax in 2017, when Myanmar's military, known as the Tatmadaw, launched a military campaign in response to attacks by a Rohingya militant group known as the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, RSA. On August 25, 2017, ARSA attacked several police stations and military bases in Rakhine, provoking a brutal response from the army. What followed was a violent crackdown that many international observers, including the UN and human rights organizations, called ethnic cleansing and genocide. Myanmar's security forces have been accused of carrying out a campaign of killings, rape, and systematic destruction of Rohingya villages. According to reports from organizations such as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, hundreds of villages were burned to the ground, and tens of thousands of Rohingya were killed or abused by the local army and militias. Amid this horror, nearly 1 million Rohingya were forced to flee their homes, crossing the border into Bangladesh, where they sought refuge in overcrowded camps and deplorable conditions. Cox's Bazar refugee camp in Bangladesh became the largest in the world, hosting nearly 900,000 Rohingya refugees. Without access to adequate basic services such as clean water, food, healthcare, and education, refugees faced a protracted humanitarian crisis. The international response was immediate but divided. The United Nations condemned the actions of Myanmar's military, and in 2019 the Hague-based International Court of Justice, ICJ, agreed to examine a genocide case brought by the Gambia against Myanmar. At the same time, economic sanctions were imposed on some of the military leaders responsible for the repression, including senior Tatmadaw commanders. However, countries such as China and Russia blocked tougher resolutions in the UN Security Council, citing Myanmar's national sovereignty and its strategic interests in the region. The figure of Aung San Suu Kyi, Myanmar's civilian leader and Nobel Peace Prize laureate, was also deeply affected by the crisis. Aung San Suu Kyi, who had been admired internationally for her fight against the military dictatorship in her country, faced harsh criticism for her role in the crisis. Many expected him, as a figure of democracy and human rights, to denounce violence against the Rohingya, but instead, he defended the actions of the government and the military in international forums. Its reputation, especially in the West, suffered a significant blow. The impact of the Rohingya crisis has been devastating for this community. In addition to physical violence, they have experienced systematic dehumanization. They have been denied access to education, healthcare, and other essential services. For years, the Rohingya have not been able to marry without government permission and are often not allowed to move freely within Myanmar. The lack of legal recognition has left this community in a state of statelessness, further complicating any long-term solution. The humanitarian aspect of the crisis continues to be a priority for many international organizations, which have attempted to provide assistance to refugees in Bangladesh. However, the situation remains very difficult, as living conditions in the refugee camps are extremely precarious. Shortages of adequate food, water, and medical services remain a constant problem, and overcrowded conditions increase the risk of communicable diseases. As for a political solution, little has changed since 2017. Myanmar continues to refuse to recognize the Rohingyas' citizenship, and negotiations for their repatriation have stalled due to a lack of security guarantees and basic rights. Although Bangladesh and Myanmar have reached repatriation agreements, refugees are reluctant to return to a country where they fear further persecution and violence. The case of the Rohingya has highlighted some of the deepest problems in the current international system, in particular the lack of effective mechanisms to prevent and stop ethnic cleansing and genocide. Despite condemnations and sanctions, the international community has been unable to end the crisis. Moreover, the fact that Myanmar is backed by great powers such as China and Russia has further complicated any attempt at humanitarian intervention. To this day, the Rohingya crisis continues. Although there have been some attempts to conduct investigations and prosecutions into human rights violations in Myanmar, the situation remains precarious. The International Criminal Court (ICC) has launched investigations into crimes committed against the Rohingya, but key perpetrators have yet to be brought to justice. For the Rohingya, the future remains uncertain. As the years go by, conditions in refugee camps in Bangladesh deteriorate, and the prospect of a safe and dignified return to Myanmar seems increasingly remote. Without legal recognition, without rights, and without a country that fully accepts them, the Rohingya continue to be one of the most persecuted and marginalized communities in the world. This tragic episode in recent history serves as a reminder of the ethnic and religious tensions that still persist in many countries, and of the challenges faced by international bodies in the struggle for human rights. As the Rohingya crisis remains unresolved, the international community must continue to work to ensure that these vulnerable people receive the protection and rights they have been denied for so long. Thank you for joining us in this analysis of the Rohingya genocide in Myanmar. If you liked the episode, don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell for more revealing stories in Untold History. See you in the next one.